So I'm going to start work on the border now, which for me is a really exciting part. I love seeing how the blanket's all grown, and it's almost like adding the frame to your picture. I really love working on borders. What I've used here is just a rectangle of a crochet, and this was one of the samples that I made at the very beginning. So I was playing with colour but wasn't necessarily using the same stitches, but this will just give you a really good overview of how you work the first row of the border. And I've chosen one of the very sort of soft neutrally colours out of the colour palette to work right around the blanket. So we start off at the top. So this is the row that you will have just finished. So you've got some lovely easy stitches for working into. So I've got my yarn and I make my slip knot. So I'm all ready to go. So I'm just going to put my hook without the slip knot to start with underneath that first stitch. So you can see it's just slotted underneath those two loops of the stitch. I'm going to bring my yarn through, and then I'm going to anchor that nice and securely by putting the yarn round, and that's my first chain. Now the stitch that we're going to work is the half treble. So if you remember from before, we do 2 chains for a half treble, and that's the height of the half treble. I don't do what I often do, is start crocheting with your little end. So pull that over here and make sure you're working from your ball of yarn. So in this stitch we've got the 2 chain, and that's equivalent to 1 half treble. And now I'm going to work a half treble. So if you remember, it's yarn around your hook into the same hole, pull through, and then yarn through all 3. Just put that tail out of the way. And now I'm going to make 1 chain. I'm going to go back into the same stitch, and I'm going to work 2 more half treble. So remember, it's through all 3 stitches, yarn round, through, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn round through all 3. And you can see in that 1 stitch I've got my 2 chain, which is going to be equivalent to my half treble, 1 more half treble, a chain, and 2 half treble, and that's going to be the first corner of your blanket. So now we're just going to work across. Now you'll have 132 stitches to work across. That's how many stitches you should have on your blanket. So I'm just going to work across this swatch quite quickly, and I'm just working 1 half treble into each stitch. So it's a nice stitch for starting your border, and you'll be very used to it because you'll have to use this stitch a few times within your blanket. So let's just go across. So I'm almost at the end, just got a couple more stitches. You can always stop this video because obviously you've got a lot more stitches to work. Now in this last stitch here, I'm going to do 1 half treble, and then another half treble, a chain, and 2 more half trebles. And can you see that's actually turning me round the corner? So I've added a little corner in there. Just think I've got a slight loose thread from the white from before, so I'm just going to pull that through. Yep, that's better. So we started off, that's your first corner, and this is our second corner. Now this can be a little bit more tricky because here we had all the stitches that were very, very easy to work into, and now we're working down the side of our blanket. So we're working into the edges of the rows that we've already worked into. So just let me get my yarn sorted. So you can see here this creamy row was a double crochet row. So I'm just going to work into the end of it and pull through. Now, I forgot to put my yarn around my hook then, didn't I? So remember, we're doing half trebles, and because I just mentioned double crochets, I totally forgot to wrap my yarn around. So I've wrapped it round. I'm going into the end of that double crochet, I'm pulling my loop up, 3 loops on the hook and through all 3. Now here you can see I've got a 3 chain because there was some V-stitch here, so I'm going to have more space to add stitches. So I'm going to work 2 half trebles here, 1, 2, and then just sort of feel, does that look like it's going to pull tightly? It's important that we don't put too many stitches in, otherwise you'll have a very, very wavy edge. But if you don't have enough, then it's going to pull and pucker and be quite tight. So the number of stitches you work down the side will be different depending on somebody's tension, whereas the numbers you work across the top and the bottom, we should all have the same number of stitches. But some people will need to put 3 half trebles into the sides of a 3 chain, otherwise their work will pull. With my tension, 2 trebles seems to work. You can see that's lying really nice and flat. Sorry, 2 half trebles. Now we're going to go into the next stitch here, and this is a double crochet, so I probably only need to do 1. So I'm just going to pull through. Yes, just 1 looks good. And then I'm going to go back to here, which is the beginning of a V-stitch again. So I think I'll need to do 2 here. So I've pulled through. Yes, that's all lying quite flat. Got another chain here, so we'll add 2 into this longer chain at the end of the row. Can you see how that's lying nice and neatly? Now we've come this paler blue. This is obviously some double crochet, so probably only going to need to do 1 at each end there. So that's 1, and then the next one along, we'll do 1 more. And as I'm picking up these stitches, I always look back and just give it a little pull and straighten to make sure it's lying flat. So let's just do a couple more. Just unwind my wool. So I've got to another V-stitch row where we've got the 3 chain that starts. So let's do 2 in there, 2 of our half trebles, 1, 2, and then the same again here, 1, 2. I'll just do a couple more. I'll just do the stitch into the end of this double crochet, 1. Sometimes it is tricky to get your hook in, but just be firm with it, just poke it through, it will be absolutely fine. It's a lot tougher than it looks. So you can see how that's set, it's really sort of straight, we've got no puckers, it's not wavy, and just really continue like this, working right down the edge of your blanket. And then when you get to the other end, that's when you're going to do your next corner. So in the last stitch of the row, you're going to do exactly what you did here at the beginning. You're going to put 2 half treble, 1 chain, 2 half treble. And then when you're working across the bottom of the blanket, if I just take my hook out, you can see when you first started your blanket, remember we had 1 loop behind, underneath the hook, and 2 loops at the top. Well, there's that 1 loop that you left. So you've got all those loops to very, very easily work into. And then you'll work along here. In the very last stitch, you'll make your next corner, and then you'll work up the side, exactly the same way you have done on this side. And then when you get to this corner, you're just going to do a slip stitch into that very top stitch. And then you'll have been all the way round your blanket.